Hell Let Loose Vietnam just launched and I got a chance to play it early. This game takes all the hardcore tactical elements from Hell Let Loose into the Vietnam War with incredibly authentic weapons, vehicles, maps, and mechanics. And the result is a fresh and focused experience that works surprisingly well in this otherwise somewhat chaotic theater of war. Now, I want to give a big thanks to the devs for getting me early access to their game and sponsoring today's video. Check out Hell Let Loose Vietnam for yourself. There's a link to the game in the video description. So if you never played the original Hell Let Loose before, it shares a lot of the same DNA with this game. It's a multiplayer FPS with a deep appreciation for authenticity and teamwork. And the maps are absolutely massive. So you have to use logistics vehicles like trucks, boats, and helicopters to move troops and supplies to the starting objectives. Forward spawn locations have to be constructed. So even if your team captures a point, you'll need to build a rally point or garrison to have the team actually deploy there. And this means that your team's also going to have to maintain both attack and defense, much more seriously than other games, while also moving supplies to key objectives and ensuring that there's quick routes for infantry to get across the map. The end result is a very strategic experience where being in the right place basically guarantees non-stop action, but if you make a mistake, it could cost you minutes of traveling back to where you died. It's a system that rewards smart strategic play just as much as a player's skill sets. The guns are deadly accurate and semi-auto, and headshots are satisfying with a lethal, beautiful metal ping sound, letting you know that the enemy isn't getting back up. Now, in terms of things that have changed with Hell Let Loose Vietnam versus the original, aside from the obvious, like the Vietnam setting, is it brings some major new mechanics. A big one of those is pilotable helicopters. Here, you can actually fly Hueys for the full war experience. The devs have faithfully recreated this iconic aircraft, complete with 2 mounted machine guns. And if you know anything about the Vietnam War, you'll know that these were the vehicles of the US forces. So the Vietnamese faction does not get helicopters. In fact, the game is asymmetrically balanced. So to make things work out well, they gave the Vietnamese a tunnel system that is effectively a manually placed fast travel point that connects rally points and garrisons, giving the entire team a very fast way to get around the map. Now, designing for asymmetrical teams can be extremely challenging, and honestly, I had some trepidations here. But in practice, it felt like the devs have found a really incredible middle ground. The tunnel system, which sounds incredibly overpowered, it does have to be constructed, and it must be within range of your other deployment buildings to actually function. So it's not like you can just put one deep in enemy territory and start flanking the entire enemy team with each spawn. They require teamwork and planning to take advantage of. But once you do have them set up, they'll let you do things like cross dangerous sight lines basically unseen. The way tunnels work is that once placed, they connect nearby tunnels and deployments, and you can interact with the tunnels or the deployments to enter the tunnels, which is basically just picking where you want to end up. A quick animation plays and you're back into the action. Which might be a little weird thinking that there's a fast travel mechanic in a Hell Let Loose game, but in practice it's actually quite nice not to, have to manually crawl through a underground tunnel network. And the entrances do make a very audible sound, so any enemies in the vicinity should have an easier time of actually tracking them down and destroying them. And speaking of which, the sound design in Hell Let Loose Vietnam is fantastic. Tracking enemies shuffling through the bushes presents some great positional audio. I had no trouble tracking targets even when I couldn't see them, which was great when I was holed up in a shack behind enemy lines. It also led to some very funny moments where I could hear the enemy coming and watch the leaves rustling as they crawled toward me. One time I was hoping the enemy would just crawl past and I could surprise attack him, but it didn't quite play out that way. Now, speaking of bushes and amazing transitions, I really like the map design in this game. I got a chance to play several maps and they all had a different feel or focal point, which is a little surprising in a Vietnam game. But each map has a distinct sense of place. Even though most of the maps feature some combination of rivers, forest, terrain, landmarks, and buildings scattered across all of them, well, each map still provided some very unique engagement areas. On one map, we're assaulting a cliff face reefs littered with villages below. On another, there was a massive bridge spanning a river with a central objective below it. And on another, there was a massive desert covering huge chunks of map that forced us into the surrounding forest just to move around and cover. And even further, another map featured a whole industrial section of military bases and outposts that was a completely different vibe. Now, coming back to some of this game's asymmetry, the US faction's helicopters, which are so cool by the way, give you an awesome advantage for getting to objectives early, and they already have built-in defenses with the mounted machine guns. But they do ascend and descend pretty slowly, plus rockets or tanks will pretty much ground them instantly. So a bad pilot isn't going to do your team any favors. Now, this game also has naval combat, not something I was actually expecting to see here, but was very excited to see. Both factions can operate heavily armed patrol boats across the river systems on most of the maps, and these are some pretty heavy-duty boats with a front and rear gunner. There are also mobile spawn points that the entire team can use that can really speed up the pace of troop deployments and change the flow of a battle, provided that your boat has a good captain. Naval combat in the first Hell Let Loose just wasn't a thing, so seeing it expanded to include boats and swimming mechanics is really awesome. Now that said, the gunner position, well, just like in real life, are very exposed, and if your captain isn't on point, well, let's just say I'll be sniping you out of that gunner seat every chance I get. Now, playing through the different roles, like getting a machine gunner and a sniper, something that really stuck out to me was just how accessible the gunplay is. This is something that's not always that common in more mil-simmy type games. The automatic weapons have pretty moderate recoil, especially when fired in bursts. It's very manageable, but not a laser beam either. Even the machine gun, I was able to mow down medium range targets quickly. Sniping also felt great, and I was doing it every chance I got, though, and maybe this is an era appropriate thing, I was missing some decent range finding tools. I guess I just gotta lick a finger and hold it up to see which way the wind is blowing here. Nonetheless, all the classes feel very fun and purpose-built. In one match, I picked the machine gunner role because we kept getting ambushed while taking objectives, and being able to clear out entire squads without reloading while still being mobile enough to stay on flanks and keep the enemy guessing was a ton of fun. They kept pouring in over the perimeter wall, I kept mowing them down, and I was still mobile enough to find the outposts that they were coming from and destroy it. Also, I gotta say, I appreciate the very unexpected quick machine gun reload. Now, a cool little detail that I definitely recognize as somebody who spends a lot of time on YouTube is that Hell Let Loose Vietnam includes narrated weapon histories featuring the one and only Jonathan Ferguson, an expert in firearms history and the keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK.
Similar in most respects to the Soviet original, the Type 56 differs in having an enclosed front sight and, commonly, an integral folding spike bayonet.
He also has the excellent Firearms Expert React series on YouTube. And I gotta say, it's just so cool seeing folks that I watch fairly regularly on YouTube popping up in video games. Plus, the histories that pop up with each of these guns are great ways to learn about more than just the gun itself, but the times and the factors that are surrounded the designs of these weapons. It's super interesting and is just a really cool addition to the game. Now, when it comes to graphics and performance, I know there have been some concerns in previous playtests for Hell Let Loose, but this update experience was overall very positive for me. Hell Let Loose Vietnam is certainly demanding at higher settings, but I think the visuals justify just how demanding it can be. A jungle environment has to be one of the hardest environments to render with a solid frame rate, and I think the devs did an admirable job here getting things to play smoothly. The game also gives you plenty of settings to get that stable frame rate depending on what your system can bring. For most of my playtime, I had the game set to high with DLS set to quality at 4K output, and it was very smooth. Folks on moderate to high-end systems should be able to crank the visuals, while folks on lower PCs will hopefully still have the options that they need to get good performance. The performance did vary a little on map to map, but once I dialed in my settings, I was playing basically in the high preset, not noticing frame rate issues. And graphically in general, this is one of the better looking Vietnam era games I've ever played. The dense jungle environments are just super impressive with tons of foliage everywhere. And I'm sure it was a huge technical challenge to achieve this level of density and maintain a playable frame rate. Overall, I think Hell Let Loose Vietnam is one of the more fun and visually impressive Vietnam experiences that I've played in terms of a multiplayer FPS. I'm impressed that the devs took on the asymmetrical design and actually made it work. There's so many things about the Vietnam War that make it super challenging to translate into a video game, not just visually, but also from a gameplay standpoint. And as a YouTuber, not to mention the compression artifacts that I'm sure YouTube will inject in this video because, well, streaming systems don't deal well with lots of foliage and greens and brown color mixtures. There's all kinds of mega challenges that the devs overcame to make this game, and I had an absolute blast playing it early. I'm looking forward to checking out the public release as well. Again, check out this game for yourself using my link in the video description. Once again, big shout out to the devs for sponsoring today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.